The first auto mechanic I visited gave me an estimate on repairs for my car. That sounds fine, I replied. But I also intend to get an estimate from the mechanic down the street. Well, the man replied, I can't say anything against him. He's the best friend I've got. Surprised at the friendly competition, I got the second estimate. When I returned to the first repair shop, the mechanic greeted me with a smile. He doubled my bid for labor, didn't he? I told you he's the best friend I've got. At Air Force Base, we trainees were required to say sir before and after speaking to an instructor. Serving guard duty one night, one buddy had a hard time grasping the concept. A drill instructor approached him and asked how duty was going. Everything is fine, sir, he answered. Airman, the DI barked. The first thing out of your mouth should be sir, and the last thing out of your mouth should be sir. Is that clear? Yes, sir, the trainee blurted out. This is your last chance, screamed the DI. Now, what is the first word to come out of your mouth? Sir, 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 the airman shouted. A good friend of mine warned me that, as my 3 daughters became old enough to date, I'd disapprove of every young man who took them out. When the time came, I was pleased that my friend's prediction was wrong. Each boy was pleasant and well-mannered. Talking to my daughter Mandy one day, I said that I liked all the young men she and her sisters brought home. You know, Dad, she replied, we don't show you everybody. Adam was walking around the Garden of Eden feeling very lonely, so God asked Adam, what is wrong with you? Adam said he didn't have anyone to talk to. God said he was going to give him a companion and it would be a woman. He said, this person will cook for you and wash your clothes, she will always agree with every decision you make. She will bear you children and never ask you to get up in the middle of the night to take care of them. She will not nag you and will always be the first to admit she was wrong when you've had a disagreement. She will never have a headache and will freely give you love and passion whenever needed. Adam asked God, what will a woman like this cost? God said, an arm and a leg. Adam said, what can I get for just a rib? The rest is history. Working for a judge in a common pleas court, I saw many criminal defendants. One man facing drug charges proved unusually helpful. To determine the exact quantity of the illegal substance allegedly sold, the judge asked the prosecutor how many grams there are in an ounce. As both attorneys checked their notes, the defendant, who had not yet entered his plea, proudly announced, there are 28.3 grams in an ounce, Your Honor. His attorney advised him to plead guilty. At Town Square, a friend and I watched as a chess expert took on all comers and then collected money from his defeated opponents. After exchanging pleasantries, I sat down at the board and soundly defeated him. I didn't know you were such a fine chess player, my surprised friend commented as we walked off. I'm not, I confessed. Before we started I told him that I worked for the IRS. My brother and his wife started their family in their early 40s. One day my sister-in-law and I were commiserating about the effects of time marching on. I just got my first pair of glasses, she said, and paused as her 2 preschool boys thundered past her. Now, if only my hearing would go. As a professional clown, I entertain groups at parties and company picnics. Once, an inebriated guest began heckling me in the middle of a performance, disrupting my act. Trying to ignore him wasn't working, so I used a different tactic. Slipping my arm around his shoulder, I looked him in the eye and said, Mister, I get paid to dress up and make a fool of myself. What's your excuse? He said not another word. When my husband and I were first married many years ago, we spent much of our free time grilling dinner on our patio and speculating about the other couples living in our condominium complex. We named them all. The activity fans ran about in sweatpants and sneakers. The newlyweds strolled arm in arm. The shoppers never came home without packages. And the carryouts had Chinese food delivered every other night. One morning Mrs. Newlywed knocked on our door, explaining that she had locked herself out of her condo and needed to phone her husband. She told him she was calling from a neighbor's and asked him to come home and let her in. He must have asked her which neighbor, because she glanced at me and shielded the receiver with her hand. "You know," she whispered into the phone, "the barbecuers." When I joined the army at age 23, I didn't realize I was that much older than most recruits until we had our first physical training test. The maximum score for the 5 events was 500 points, and I was the only trainee in our platoon to get 400. The drill sergeant called me to stand alone in front of the assembled platoon, and I thought I was about to be praised. But, turning to the other trainees, he barked, "If that old man can get 400 points, just think what the rest of you should have scored." Our young daughter had adopted a stray cat. To my distress, he began to use the back of our new sofa as a scratching post. "Don't worry," my husband reassured me. "I'll have him trained in no time." I watched for several days as my husband patiently trained our new pet. Whenever the cat scratched, my husband deposited him outdoors to teach him a lesson. The cat learned quickly. For the next 16 years, whenever he wanted to go outside, he scratched the back of the sofa. Our annual high school faculty party was held at a popular restaurant. By late evening, our waiter looked dead on his feet. My husband told him to pull up a chair. "Are all you folks teachers?" the young man asked. "Why, yes," I replied. "What makes you ask?" "I never waited on a group like this before," he said. "Every time one of you wants something, you raise your hand." A couple entered the store where I sold furniture, and the wife said they were interested in a sofa. After I showed her several styles and colors, she made her selection. "Hold it," her husband interrupted, slipping off his shoes. "Let's give this thing a real test." He lay down on the sofa, found a comfortable position and grinned at his wife. "Now," he said, "start telling me how much the grass needs cutting." Jack, my 40-something husband, was playing basketball with friends his age. "Pretty soon," said one of his teammates, "we'll have to count it as a basket if the ball just hits the rim." "Yeah," Jack agreed. "It's scary when you have to look through the bottom part of your bifocals to shoot layups and the top part on jump shots." One night after a date with her new boyfriend, my 16-year-old daughter, Kathy, rushed into the kitchen to share her news. "Mom, he kissed me," she announced proudly. My husband and daughter have always been close, and he had been having a hard time facing the fact that she was growing up. I knew he might not wish to hear of her first kiss. Kathy, however, had already told him. I was relieved and touched when she repeated their conversation. "Dad," she had whispered, "he kissed me." "Honey," he whispered back, "I don't blame him." One evening my 16-year-old daughter, Lisa, and I were watching TV. During a commercial advertising books on life after death and unexplained mysteries, Lisa started asking me questions on dying. Unable to answer everything, I told her, "No one really knows what takes place once a person passes on. It's just wise to live every day as if it were your last." "I tried that once," Lisa said. "And you grounded me?"